emergency in San Francisco. What happened? There's a hell of an earthquake, and we've got windows and everything that have fallen out.
How is it all emergency?
Cypress section of the West Grand Freeway has come down.
The Cypress structure has collapsed.
What about the Bay Bridge?
What about the Bay Bridge? What's wrong with it?
The upper deck appears to have collapsed. 2,000 to 3,000 people outside of their cars.
Copy, your westbound section has collapsed into the eastbound section, about a 50-foot section.
What? Get the aftershocks. We've got cops, we've got CHP, we got...
Where's the crap? Okay, let me check.
Power has been interrupted temporarily in the park.
We are in the Marina District of San Francisco.
Please clear the area. We do not have enough medical personnel to be able to handle you.
Shook like it was just a piece of straw.
The entire city, at least the part of the city that I have been in all day, is completely blacked out.
San Francisco, California, 1906 earthquake.
Most of us only know about the 1906 San Francisco disaster through faded, silent black and white photographs. But have you ever wondered if we were truly standing there, what colors that world would have had?
Of San Franciscans watching their city burn after the 1906 earthquake. Obviously, the devastation was insane. There was a 7.9 magnitude earthquake on April 18th, and for 3 days following that, there were fires that literally ripped through the city and destroyed about 80% of the infrastructure in San Francisco, leaving over half of the city's population homeless. There were 400,000 people living in the city at the time. 250,000 people were left homeless, with nowhere really to go but to get to safety.
Earthquakes have always captured the human imagination. Long before modern seismology, people looked to the skies for meaning when the earth shook beneath their feet. In ancient cultures, astrologers believed that the movements of the planets and stars mirrored events here on Earth. As above, so below. When unusual planetary alignments occurred, they were often interpreted as signs that upshoveled the civilization, sometimes literally beneath the feet, as the Earth's foundation occurred. Astrology has historically been used to interpret national disasters, including earthquakes, floods, and volcano eruptions. Early astrologers in the places of ancient Greece and the Babylonian and Mesoamericans studied the planetary cycles, eclipses, and the movement of lunar nodes in an attempt to understand the periods of instability. Planets such as Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto often been symbolic and associated with massive pressure, disruption, and transformation. The archetypes that astrologers sometimes link to the area of earthquake activity. However, the question may be is whether an astrologer can truly predict an actual earthquake. The honest answer is while astrologers have occasionally suggested periods of time of heightened tension or instability based on planetary patterns, astrology has never reliably predicted the exact time, location, or magnitude of an earthquake. Modern earthquakes are understood through geology, plate tectonics, not planetary influence. What astrology can offer is a symbolic lens rather than a scientific forecast. Astrologers sometimes look at birth charts of historical earthquakes to explore repeating themes such as strong Uranus and Saturn activity, significant node placements, or critical degrees that could have been activated, creating an area of crisis. These patterns can be fascinating from a symbolic lens and even an area of cosmic perspective, but they are not a tool for precise disaster prediction. In other words, astrology may help us reflect on the meaning of these cycles, the pressure, and the patterns of transformation in both the cosmos and the human consciousness, but it does not function as a seismic warning system. When the Earth moves, science explains the mechanics, but astrology can still offer insight to the stories that may be laying beneath the Earth from the heavens or the energy of the galaxies. Crisis and renewal, the energy of patterns that seem a little bit familiar. California has always been a mega hub for earthquakes. And I take time to take a look at 4 of the most influential, massive, and destructive earthquakes in California's history. One of the things that I noticed was some of them did have a lot of similarities in their cosmic structures, especially around movement that seems to be coming up quite soon. Let's get into 4 birth charts of California's most devastating earthquakes. The first earthquake was in 1906, San Francisco's biggest earthquake, as some would say. The date occurred on April 18th at 1906 in the location of San Francisco with a magnitude of 7.9. The casualties consisted of 700 to 3,000 people. Injuries believed to be in the high 200,000s. The earthquake that tore through San Francisco in 1906 is still considered one of the most devastating, horrific areas of earthquake in recorded history. Roughly around 28,000 buildings were destroyed or collapsed as a result of the quake. There were fires that burned through the city, leaving many people homeless. Most of the damage was done by the fires as the quake destroyed water lines and left firefighters with no way to take out the fires. Damages totaled around $400 million. And in 1906, that was a lot of money. $400 million? That seems almost horrific. The event created a refugee crisis not often seen in American history. Roughly 250,000 people lost their homes due to this quake, making the reconstruction a top priority for Californians. However, the city bounced back and became energetic relatively quickly, and even saw a population increase in the coming years. Due to massive destruction, the city had to rebuild from the ground up, which created a more elegant and perceived notion of San Francisco, locally designed with structure and architectural standout that only the city could resemble. This attracted new residents. The interesting thing about the large San Francisco earthquake is that the gas lines ruptured and the fires across the city were destroyed. They could not contain it. The human impact was massive. Many people were left homeless. Let's look at the birth chart of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The 1906 earthquake was definitely fiery, karmic, some would even say, and structurally fated. We're going to break it down. This was a high energy in the sign of Aries. This earthquake had a sun in Aries at 27 degrees and ascended in Aries as 18 degrees. Many people would call this a double Aries event. Aries rules and is known for bringing sudden force, violence, initiation, and even some would say explosion. New beginnings, as Aries is the area of 1 or the first constellation of the zodiac calendar. Earthquakes are Mars-ruled events, raw, primal, explosive. The Aries rising makes this energy aggressive, fast, uncontainable, and it created shock through the areas of the city. This was not a subtle energy. This was an energy of initiation and movement. The moon is at 0 degrees in Pisces, and 0 degrees is known as a birth degree, an area of movement, of rebirth, or new beginnings. The movement of collective grief is often seen with a moon in Pisces. During certain events, this energy could bring chaos, disillusions, flooding, and areas around water, considering it is in the water element of Pisces. Symbolically and literally, because flooding did occur with this earthquake, as the fires broke many water lines. Pisces dissolves boundaries. Many believe that Neptune energy is almost like an illusion. It's not really real, is it? And this earthquake dissolves structures, homes, and emotional security. This energy also had a Saturn in Pisces at 11 degrees. Saturn shows energies around structures and area of movement, foundation, and responsibility. Pisces equals the energy of disillusion, the area of structures dissolving together, could have been the mechanism of some of the repetitive patterns that we will see. Venus and Mars were also in Taurus at the time of this quake. Venus at 13 degrees in Taurus and Mars at 22 degrees in Taurus. Taurus rules the energy of land as it is an earth sign. Many times people will say when Mars is sitting in an earth element, the earth tends to get angry. Taurus rules land, earth, physical stability, some would even say the area of foundation, money, and buildings. This is heavy with earth energy, as Taurus is ruled by Venus, so physical matter is emphasized. But Mars in Taurus is a force applied to the land itself. It definitely has an area of symbolic history that an earthquake may bring or be recognized in future events. And with Venus, we see how that energy of new relationships, new movements, and stability around luxury became the main focus of San Francisco's pipeline. Neptune in Cancer in 7 degrees. Cancer rules the area of home, domestic life, security. Neptune is known to be an illusion, dissolving it. Homes were destroyed, structures were falling, families displaced, and mass emotional trauma. This aligns with the energy that refugees could be seen as an area of focus. This movement shows area of crisis and also wisdom as it is aligned with 7 degrees. Uranus in Capricorn in 8 degrees of retrograde. Uranus shocks. Capricorn is the infrastructure, the government, the archetype, the area of architecture or structure. This is a sudden textbook astrology lecture of sudden collapse of public structures. Capricorn also rules authority, the rebuilding afterwards, and reshaping the city's long-term structure and the history of what can occur. Some would even say the cosmic alignment of destiny. Pluto in Gemini at 21 degrees. Pluto is the area of transformation. It is seen as the movement of communication, networks, and systems. Telegraph lines, transport systems, and city grids. Also during this time, we have the city's communication and transportation infrastructures were basically transformed forever following the 1906 earthquake. Now, when we talk about the nodal axis, there's some similarities that are going to stand out. The North Node in Leo and the South Node in Aquarius at 18 degrees. the same nodal axis as one of the other earthquakes we will look at, which was the 1812 quake. Leo is centered around identity, sovereignty, and areas of movement around taking center stage. The Aquarius is often seen as collective systems. San Francisco's identity was permanently changed following this quake. The quake destroyed the old collective structure and forced rebirth upon the city itself. We also had a midheaven in Capricorn at 10 degrees, where we see the energy of public legacy, the area of Capricorn themes, infrastructure reform, building codes, structural authority, and the movement how the government played with this earthquake. The quake permanently changed American engineering. The core themes that we seen in the 1906 earthquake was sudden initiation, areas of dominance that many would say was centered around the fire destroyer of the Aries, the structural disillusion, areas of illusions coming to dissolve in the energy of Saturn and Pisces, the land shifting or being up-leveled in the area of the Mars in Taurus concentration, and the institutional shock that we saw with Uranus and Capricorn. Also, the emotional displacement that occurred.
To practice their own spiritual presence, and also not being allowed to focus on their own indigenous beliefs. They were being forced into religion, and they were also being forced into the California missions, which were to basically transition a lot of Native Americans into the Catholicism of the time. So back in 1812 of San Juan Capistrano struck this huge earthquake that occurred on December 8th of 1812. Now this earthquake was devastating to the area of the early colonization of the religious practices, because this occurred in the area of a mission. So the magnitude of this earthquake was estimated at 7.5. The location was near San Juan Capistrano, and the casualties believed to be around 40 deaths. Injuries are unknown. But on one morning of December 8th, the feast day of Immaculate Conception, Native American practitioners or parishioners who were forced to basically find themselves at the mission practicing Catholicism were struck by a powerful quake. And during this time, they were in this huge mission. The stone church, known as the Great Stone Church, collapsed during the service. 40 Native Americans lost their lives when the roof and the bell tower came crashing down. Interesting, historians believe that this was that the epicenter, or meaning the fault line or the peak of the earthquake, was not directly beneath the mission, suggesting that the seismic waves were strong enough to cause the structural damage, even though the area of movement started many, many miles away. And it showed how the structural damage of the missions failed in many aspects. So the aftershocks and the regions definitely felt the impact. This earthquake was part of a sequence of smaller southern earthquakes. So what's interesting is usually when there is a big earthquake, they state that there's many little subtle earthquakes before, and also earthquakes that occur after. So there's definitely a lot of historical significance with this earthquake. It remains one of the earliest documented major earthquakes in California history of 1812, but also it shows the area of vulnerability that the missions have. And I think it brings a lot of like almost spiritual practice, spiritual knowledge and awareness, as the ruins of the Great Stone Church still stand today as a memorial to remind us of this event. The tragedy is especially significant because it reflects the complex of often some of California's most painful history, which was definitely the California mission system, where Native communities who lived here and worshipped here were forced to give up a lot of their indigenous practices. So what we know about this earthquake, the 1812 San Juan Capistrano earthquake, is definitely one of the earliest earthquakes that we are looking at. But we also know that it happened on December 8th at 1812, 7 a.m. in San Juan Capistrano of California. So it is a sun in Sagittarius with an ascendant in Sagittarius. So some would say it is a double Sagittarius. The sun is almost exactly conjunct with the ascendant, and this makes this event highly visible. The Sagittarius is also known for being very fiery and also being centered on areas of defining certain religious identities and moments that could reshape somebody's belief system. As we see, the Sagittarius is really structured with that philosopher's type thinking. The Sagittarius does rule religion in some aspects and the energy of faith. While it is not seen as a spiritual process as the Pisces may be seen as, we see that area of philosophy and mission work really gets highlighted. And it's interesting because this event had so much history tied into it. Also, the Sagittarius does resemble the area of, some would say, mission work and expansion, as its ruler is Jupiter, and also moral philosophy, which I really think kind of kicks high initiative with this event. There's definitely, as people are reflecting it, we definitely see that a lot of the California missions weren't something that the indigenous population asked for. It was something that was forced upon them. The earthquake occurred during Mass at the missions church, and that symbolized a energy that is, I would almost say, very powerful, that religion can't control, philosophy can't control. It's a very powerful, dominant movement. A Sagittarius dominant chart is tied into some energies of destruction, maybe even being a little naive. Now, when we look at the moon energy, the moon is in Aquarius at 9 degrees, and it is seen as a collective degree. And it is also seen as a higher energy degree in the movement of being with Aquarius, the collective community, as some would say, the coven, the area of collection, the area of collaboration, the humanitarian social groups does resemble with this. And the moon represents the public emotion that was definitely tied in here with areas of shock. I'm sure there was tons of shock. The natives who lost their lives at this time. What's also interesting is during this time, we see that there was some wounds, obviously, with the community, and almost an energy of karmic movement, as there is a Chiron in Aquarius at 26 degrees. Now, the North Node in Leo and the South Node in Aquarius at 21 degrees. This is a nodal axis. It's very powerful. The South Node in Aquarius, karmic collective patterns. The North Node in Leo, that individual freedom and sovereignty. The areas of leadership really plays out with these nodal events. This event may symbolically mark a collapse of imposed collective religions, structures, and karmic turning points in areas of authority and identity. The Leo rules kingship, power, leadership, the sun. And we see with the mission represents an institutional authority. And I would say that this quake, this big, huge earthquake, definitely fractured that energy. Also, we see that Saturn is in Capricorn at 7 degrees and Mercury is in Capricorn as well. Now, Saturn in its home sign definitely shows the area of structural authority, the government of institutions. Capricorn rules buildings, stones, authority, and the hierarchy. The Great Stone Church collapsing under the strong signature of Capricorn sounds a little poetic, doesn't it? That this Saturn is testing the structures, literally, of this foundation, testing the missions, testing to see that they too can collapse. That area of movement can collapse. Also, I'm sure there was great conversations with this Mercury in Capricorn about what happened. I believe the natives probably thought that the gods were sending a warning during this time. Pluto in Pisces at 17 degrees, areas of destruction, rebirth, and the Pisces, the spirituality, the area of intense faith, of surrendering, and also having that awareness, that consciousness, that area where spiritual transformation through destruction could occur. We also see that there's definitely some energy of the church collapsing during worship is deeply centered around religion. As many of you guys know, I do think that Jesus could possibly have been a Piscean, and that area of Pluto bringing that symbolism, that area of destruction, that area of faith kind of coming uphold. Now, the Venus and Uranus in Scorpio. Scorpio rules death as the energy of transformation and also rebirth, hidden powers, some would even say the occult, intensity, and the area of movement. Now, Uranus is a sudden shock. It's seen as, some would say, some movement of explosive energy, sudden energy, spontaneous energy, rebellious energy, where Venus equals values and relationships. There's definitely intense karmic movement that are involving shared faith, communal bonds. Mars in 29 degrees of Libra, which 29 degrees can be seen as a crisis degree. It's right before the constellation is getting ready. That planet is getting ready to switch out of that constellation. So Mars, violence, force, determination, war. Libra, balance, justice, and relationships. So this suggests that the collapse is disrupting the balance and also the karmic turning points of certain partnerships and agreements. Libra also rules architectural structures in some ways and having a symbolic, symmetrical movement. It's interesting that the symbolism of this church was structure. So we definitely see how destruction was the energy of this earthquake. It occurred in a place of worship, the mission, but the mission also has a lot of karmic lessons, the area of wounds, the area of authority, the area of forcing, a spiritual rebirth. And this was a spiritual rebirth that was forced through area of tragedy.
Another earthquake that really took precedence in California was the 1971 San Fernando, California earthquake. Now, this earthquake is to believe have a magnitude at 6.5, and it is believed that it also had a death toll of 58 people. Now, it's unclear on the actual area of damages and people who were injured, but this quake definitely had a significance. Now, what was interesting about this earthquake compared to the others was, yes, it did occur in the wee hours of the morning at 6 a.m. of 1971 of February 9th, but it was a lot of Aquarian energy. Now, I'll be honest, I was expecting to see a little more from this earthquake in the areas of movement around Mars, Aries, and maybe a fire element. But this earthquake was all wind. It was all that air sign volatility. Now, this earthquake, similar to the Aries in this aspect, is it was a sun in Aquarius at 20 degrees, occurring at 6 a.m., and an ascendant in Aquarius at 4 degrees, making it a double threat of an Aquarius. It also had a Mercury in Aquarius at 2 degrees, and the North Node was in Aquarius at 23 degrees. And this was centered around some full moon activity, as the moon was in Leo at 12 degrees, opposing that Aquarius stellium. Now, when we look at the Aquarian energy, and especially when it comes to areas of clusters or breaking ground or foundation, we see that the Aquarius rules systems. It could also be centered around infrastructure, technology, the collective, and definitely events that shock the community. And that's because of Uranus. And that Uranian energy definitely brings something out that creates a combustion. It creates something that's seen as a big spontaneous moment and almost seen as something that could be very aggressive. This quake exposed many weaknesses on the infrastructure that was centered around hospitals, freeways, and public ways of transportation and the highways. Aquarius is about the future. Aquarius is about technology. It's known for being innovative. It's known for being a little bit more centered around areas of time lapse. And this earthquake forced that current moment to kind of have an awakening. Now, it was definitely very destructive, but some people say that it reformed the way that many people thought about earthquakes, especially here in California. Now, the moon is in Leo, which is opposing the Aquarius stellium, creating an area of possible leadership. And being in the true Leo nature, it definitely likes visibility and taking center stage. Now, it's definitely a dramatic energy. A Leo moon shows areas of extreme emotions and drama. And there's a sense of pride that comes with Leo. Also with this, we have the South Node in Leo at 23 degrees, which some would say is a very vital degree. This could be seen as a karmic public drama, and it could also be seen as an area of collective systems versus the ego and senses of authority. Now, I will say that it definitely did have its earth placements that were making some rounds. We have the Saturn retrograde, or we have Saturn. I believe it was actually not in retrograde. It was just Saturn in Taurus at 16 degrees. And Saturn is centered around structures, Taurus, the area of land, physical, viable movements, and also energies of the earth. This literally, when Saturn, we look at Saturn and the way that Saturn constricts and restricts, this is literally a stress. This is literally a test of the land. Taurus governs physical matter, which could include like buildings, ground, and also areas of stability. Like a lot of times we hear that Taurus and that fixed energy is really structured off of the work of the fixed signs. It is kind of seen like the worker of the fixed energies, where you could see it definitely a Taurus being invested in making money by working hard, where Saturn is here to kind of constrict that energy of work and also maybe even weaken some of the structures to see where that energy was lacking and that there was a fail in the system, kind of creating that judgment that Saturn is known for. We also have Pluto at 29 degrees, which is also known as a crisis degree in Virgo, and it is retrograde. Now, this Virgo energy, Virgo too, centered around the area of health systems, hospitals, service workers, and definitely providing a service. So a lot of times when we talk about Virgos, we also talk about how they can be seen as teachers, somebody who's out there really helping others. The San Fernando earthquake definitely caused major hospitals to weaken, collapse, and including severe damage to the Olive Hospital. The Pluto energy screams in Virgo of transformation. Now, I definitely see how this transformation of the healthcare system and safety systems and just earthquakes as a whole was definitely highlighted as this occurred in our Earth sign. Now, there's definitely a true area of reform, because after this earthquake happened, California passed way stricter laws for earthquakes and earthquake safety following the 1971 San Fernando earthquake. So we definitely see where reform did take place and areas of movement. Now we definitely had a little baby stellium in Sagittarius during this earthquake. It's like a cluster of movement, and Sagittarius is known for areas of belief systems, law, and expansion. And what's interesting is we had Mars in Sagittarius. I did expect to see Mars in more Earth sign elements when I was looking at these earthquakes, but we're going to get into some of the other things that took place. Now, we also had Jupiter in 3 degrees in Sag and Neptune in 2 degrees in Sagittarius. Now, this quake tend to really brings change in some of the building infrastructures. Mars together with Jupiter in Sagittarius feels like a big force. It feels like a bomb. It feels like an explosion. It feels like consequences, and it also feels like a little bit of a naive energy. Like it's like that energy where you just move off of initiation and then you kind of sit back and you're like, whoa, that was fun. But guess what? I broke my ankle. Or guess what? Now I'm like in jail. Like it's just a very naive and also aggressive energy. Now we also have Uranus retrograde in Libra, and this is where we see the shock of balance, the shock of design, and the shock of architecture. Libra is known for that area of harmony, and we see Uranus totally destroyed that harmony. Whatever was balanced and felt aligned got violently woken up with this earthquake. The midheaven is in Scorpio at 22 degrees, which is seen as, some would say, a public persona, areas of legacy, and the Scorpio definitely screams transformation, rising above the ashes like a phoenix, and crisis mode. And we definitely see that this earthquake permanently transformed California in some areas, but the big theme in the 1971 earthquake was the systematic shock that the Aquarius collective felt, heavy in Aquarian energy, structural reform, which we saw with Saturn and Taurus, and also the health of infrastructure that collapsed with the Pluto being in a crisis degree in Virgo at 29. Now, comparing to big earthquakes, I will say that there's definitely a pattern that we're starting to see. We see that there's a movement of identity, systems, and infrastructure. And one of the earthquakes that really stands out at all means, and definitely took a lot of energy, and this is an earthquake that I actually remember. So we are now traveling down the area of history of the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake.
Canseco to score, and he fails to get Dave Parker at second base, so the Oakland A's take.
I'll tell you what, we're having an earthquake. We are still, as we can tell, on the air, and I guess you are hearing us, even though we have no picture and no return audio, and we will be back, we hope, from San Francisco in just a moment.
October 17th, 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake struck the San Francisco Bay Area. In less than 30 seconds, more than a mile of the double-deck Cypress Street Viaduct in Oakland collapsed. 42 people lost their lives when the upper roadway fell onto the lower level during the evening commute. The structure carried about 160,000 vehicles a day as part of Interstate 880, and the collapse became one of the deadliest infrastructure disasters in California history. Rescue crews worked through the night and for days afterwards, searching the wreckage and trying to reach people trapped inside the freeway. For Oakland, the tragedy also forced a difficult question about the massive structure that had stood over West Oakland for more than 30 years. The people who lived beneath that freeway had long argued that it never should have been built there in the first place.
Now, this earthquake happened on October 17th, 1989 at 5 p.m., actually at a pinpoint in Santa Cruz, I guess around the Santa Cruz Fault. So the Loma Prieta earthquake did occur on the San Andreas fault line. Now, it had a magnitude of 6.9, which is pretty big. Most of the earthquakes I looked at had magnitudes over 6. And this one had a lot of damage, over, I believe, $1 billion of damage that it had. And it also had a believed casualty amount of around 63 people, but I honestly think it was more. Now, this earthquake destroyed the infrastructure, especially on the Cypress Freeway, which is no longer with us. It was a freeway that was right around the Oakland area and in the Bay Area, and it caused so much damage that it was just so horrific. I remember at the time of 1989, I was about maybe, I don't want to give you guys my age, but, I was definitely about like 10, 11. And I was at the library with my mom and my sister. And I remember we were sitting there at the library and I was looking for a book. And then all of a sudden, the building just started shaking. And this was in Oakland. And it was just books flying everywhere. And as a kid, we used to do the earthquake drills where you would fire, duck, and like get under your desk. But literally it happened and you just froze. Like it was like you didn't know what to do. And I believe I did. I can't really remember, but I believe I did like kind of duck. And then my mom's like freaking out and she's like, "Oh my gosh, your dad's worker is trying to fix one of our windows. He's on the roof of our house." And I was like, "Oh my gosh," because I'm thinking he probably fell. Oh my goodness. And my mom said like when she left and he was on the ladder, getting on the roof. And I remember we were just driving back to our house. Luckily, it wasn't too far of a drive, and we didn't have to drive around the Cypress structure or any like major freeways. But I remember we get to the house and he looked white as a ghost. He looked so scared, and he was literally on the fucking roof when it happened. And he's a Hispanic man. He's Mexican, and he looked so pale, looked so like just scared. And my mom's like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And she, she cared for him, probably gave him some water, some juice. But it was just such a scary time. And then hearing all the structure and all the damage that it caused, we didn't have anybody who lost their lives, but we knew people who had friends and family who were affected by the earthquake, especially because I went to Oakland Public Schools at that time, and it was just so sad. And as a kid, it's like you see that the freeway's broken, you see all this damage, but you don't really comprehend it. And then later on in life, when I was studying some of my nursing prerequisites, I was in a first responder class, and one of the instructors was actually an old medic, and he was an old paramedic, firefighter, and he retired and went into teaching, and he was telling us just the horrific, just the horribleness of getting people out of the rubble of the earthquake back in 1989, and the PTSD that he was left with. You could feel it when he was describing it. It was very sad, very sad. So I salute all the first responders who worked that 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. And when we look at the area of this earthquake, it had a lot of history with the Bay Area. Also, the World Series was going on with Oakland Athletics and the San Francisco Giants. This literally occurred as the game was playing. So when we look at the chart, it is a little bit different than some of the earthquakes of the other ones that we looked at, especially the 1906 and the 1971. This chart's not fiery at all. Not fiery in the sense that we saw with the the 1812, right? It's not as fiery as those, and it doesn't have too much energy that mirrors chaos, but it mirrors something else. So this one's different because there is not this area of huge impact, but this area of illusions. So this earthquake is a sun in Libra at 24 degrees, and it has a Libra stellium. It also has a Mercury 9 degrees in Libra, a Mars 18 degrees in Libra, and we see Libra rules areas of balance in architecture, also design. And what's interesting is bridges. And what's interesting is that Cypress Street bridge collapsed. And sections of the freeway definitely, I believe even the Bay Bridge had damage. And we see that Mars in Libra forces disruption on areas of balance, and also some would say the equilibrium. Libra is an air sign, so the structures that require suspension and symmetry definitely feel distorted. It feels chaotic. Mars in Libra definitely feels chaotic. It feels very volatile in that essence. Also Mercury in Libra, the area of conversation. Now, when we look at this as it's ascendant, it is a Pisces rising at 22 degrees, which could show areas of disillusion, confusion, lots of confusion, and collective emotional shock, the area of self-awareness and chaos. Now, this earthquake happened during rush hour, so people were trying to get home. I was out of school. I was in the library trying to pick out a book, the school library, and during the World Series, everybody's tuned in. You got Battle of the Bay, and everybody's just so focused on that. And the whole country's watching the World Series, and then all of a sudden, boom, this huge earthquake rips through this area of San Francisco. And the Pisces rising is like a collective moment where everybody has like this consciousness of awakening. And it almost felt surreal, and still like it almost felt like a dream. And even when I remember it and just talking about it, it still feels like a dream. Like, did we really go through that? Like, were we really there for it? It kind of reminds me of like COVID. Like COVID, C-19, when we talk about the pandemic, I saw what I saw, and it still feels very real, but then it also feels very foggy, and it still almost feels like, was that a dream or was that real? Definitely a lot of people lost their lives with both situations, and we see that with that Piscean energy. Also areas of faith, hope. And then we see the movement of the moon in Gemini at 9 degrees. Now, Gemini shows areas of messenger, transportation, roads, communication, and network. Definitely networks around media. And the moon is seen as an area of emotion and also a public movement. So public transportation systems definitely collapsed during this earthquake and were impacted. The Gemini also shows that area of duality. And we had the Bay Bridge that, fell. And I remember seeing the car and it just go whoop down when the Bay Bridge kind of collapsed, that one section. And then hearing about the Cypress structure was just like, it was just insane. I don't even know how to explain it. I was a young kid processing all this. And as an adult, seeing it, later, it was definitely devastating. And then we have the Capricorn stellium, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn in Capricorn, Uranus in Capricorn, Neptune in Capricorn. This is definitely areas of infrastructure, governments, public works, and authority. Was shown with that Capricorn energy, Saturn and Uranus together, old structures being destroyed. Definitely old systems destroyed, the energy of shock, the energy of modern movement, forcing disillusion and also dishevelment and confusion that is also integrated with that Neptune. This is literally a sudden burst of an infrastructure. And unlike the 1906, the city did not burn down. It wasn't like huge flames. There wasn't like massive fires or flooding, but it was exposed by weaknesses of infrastructures. We also had Pluto in Scorpio, and Pluto in Scorpio is intense. It's centered off of death, hidden weaknesses, crisis. The quake was forced to really make California confront the systems that they've been living under with earthquake safety. The midheaven was in Sagittarius, which is the public persona, the area of movement, of reform through expansion. Now, this energy definitely retrofitted certain seismic codes and earthquake, we can't say preventative, but earthquake measures that hopefully prevent damage like this as well. Now, the North Node in Aquarius at 23 degrees, the same karmic axis as 1971. And what's interesting is we've seen this 23 degree play out. We've also seen this
karmic energy with the North Node in Aquarius and also the South Node in Leo quite a few times, especially with big magnitude earthquakes. This quake definitely pushed California into new areas of creating fundamental earthquake protected structures. And we saw that with that movement. And the pattern across, when we look at the earthquakes as a whole, the area of identity with the 1906, and I started with the 1906 and then I went back to the 1812 because of this. The 1906 showed that area of initiation that the Aries brought. It also showed that area of movement, right? Now, when I was looking at the earthquakes and deciding which one I wanted to, really emphasize in, there was just a few things that stood out to me. The magnitude and also the presence of the story of the earthquake. The 1812, we saw the faith, the spiritual authority collapsing, the areas of the indigenous population being reformed into the missions, and then the system reform of structures as the collective awoken with the 1971. And then, of course, with the 1989, the infrastructure, accountability, the Capricorn stellium. So there was definitely some movement with these earthquakes that felt very, very similar while different. Definitely we could see some patterns of recognition with these 4 earthquakes. So one of the biggest pattern recognitions that we've noticed was definitely the Aquarius and Leo nodal axis. And this is huge. This is very much centered in multiple events, in multiple earthquakes, the North Node in Aquarius, the South Node in Leo, or heavy Aquarius emphasis, the area around systems, collective structures, future and reform. The Leo is centered around identity, leadership, and ego and structures. Now, earthquakes in California seem to hit when there is some type of collective system being highlighted. For instance, will it always involve an Aquarius energy? Not necessarily, but we definitely see that there is a rhythm that plays out with the old power structures of identity and the Leo as well. So that did really kind of make my tin hat, my astrology hat kind of lighten up a little bit. And then also we saw the repeating degrees of 21 degrees, 23 degrees, and 29 degrees. Now, these degrees definitely come with some area of history. 29 Pluto in the 1971, seen as a crisis degree. The nodes at 23 degrees in the 1971 and 1989 earthquake, and 21 degrees in Pluto in the 1906, and then 21 degrees in the nodes of 1812. Now, 21 through 23 are often act as trigger zones or high energy movements that we see with some of the astrological events that have occurred in the past. Also, 29, a lot of people like to say it's a crisis degree. It's also a karmic degree at some degree. And it suggests that these events were more than just random shock waves, that they were pressure, they were releasing points that were building up, almost like a tectonic karmic area of rambunctious activity. The Capricorn and Aquarius energy, structural and karma, definitely plays theme. Capricorn, we see it again. Aquarius, the systems, the collectives. Across the charts, the Uranus and Capricorn in the 1906, the Saturn, Uranus, Neptune in Capricorn, the stellium of 1989 earthquake, and the heavy Aquarius in 1971. It definitely emphasizes the nodal destiny that was seen multiple times in these earthquakes. Now, I was expecting to see Mars being a little bit louder in some of these charts. For instance, Mars rules the area of force, rupture, and violence. Also, some would say initiation, that area of light, and a geological movement. But there's a twist that comes behind this, because earthquakes aren't explosive unless they are creating some type of explosive energy by a possible gas leak or fire. But they're more based off of pressure and a pressure release. Now, a pressure release, when I think about a pressure release, we think about Saturn in the area of compression, Pluto, deep areas of transformation, and Uranus, sudden rupture. So Mars shows that area that would light that flame, or that area that would take that initiative. But also when we think of the area of earthquakes and the tectonics that occur, the pressure builds slowly. It's not fast. And earthquakes are like a slow pressure. So we see more of Saturn and Pluto's pressure really coming forward. We also notice that in 1906, Saturn is in Pisces, which dissolved a lot of personas. 1971, Saturn is in Taurus, stress on the earth, stress on the land, and stress on areas of infrastructure when we look at materials and material gains. 1989, Saturn conjuncts Uranus in Capricorn. Now, definitely a structural shock. So the Mars energy wasn't as deep as I thought it was going to be, but it definitely was there, but not as volatile as I was expecting to see, which was interesting when I was studying these charts and looking at these charts. Now, if we're going to say that the North nodes were the ones that really played the movement, then some of us should be a little bit cautious, especially with this upcoming year. Now, I'm not going to predict any earthquakes. If you're looking for dates, that's going to be a little bit hard. But yes, the North nodes do move backwards, and through Aquarius, they're going to start to move from 29 degrees, which is seen as a crisis degree, down through the mid degrees in late of 2026. So astrologically speaking, if we're waiting for the 23 degrees in Aquarius to jump off this earthquake hot zone, we might see some type of repetitive pattern. Now, I'm just saying, if that's true, we're going to see the same similarities of the North Node being in Aquarius of 1971 and of 1989, with the Aquarius axis at 23 degrees, repeating this event. Now, is 23 in Aquarius really a structural trigger degree for California? I guess time will tell, right? But the timing of the North nodes entering Aquarius would occur in late July of 2026, and it will begin at 29 degrees and regress backwards, which would reach around 21 to 27 degrees by late December of 2026. This will definitely pass through the 2024, the 25, 24, 23, 22, and 21. That crossing of 23 degrees would occur roughly around mid-late autumn of 2026 to maybe even the energy of October, November, depending on the motion, right? We'll definitely have to be studying our astrology calendars and current transits. Now, 23 in Aquarius, does it really matter? Is this really a pattern that some of us are picking up on? Well, we see the Aquarian energy represents collective systems, infrastructure, technology, and public network. Now, the North Node amplifies evolution, destiny points, and collective curse of correction. So when the North Node crosses that exact degree, it's occupied during previous systemic collective shock waves like the 1971 and 1989. So this could be a trigger point, but that doesn't exactly mean that an earthquake's going to happen. It just means that we've noticed something. We've noticed a pattern. We've noticed something that speaks volume out of the 4 earthquakes that I took a look at, seeing that Aquarius energy. But the real question is not just, is it activating just Aquarius, but is it activating fixed signs? Because we see a lot of movement with the fixed signs. The Aquarius, the Leo, the Taurus, the Scorpio all hold a lot of tension. And California's historical quake charts repeatedly activate at 21 to 23 degrees in fixed signs, and also 29 degrees in mutable signs, as we saw in Virgo of 1971. So it's definitely something that we can look at, definitely something that we can study, definitely something that we keep in mind, right? What's going on with the nodes, what's going on with Saturn, what's going on with that energy. Definitely seeing. While astrology offers a powerful lens of understanding cycles, patterns, and deeper symbolism that is behind certain events, it is a tool for areas of research, not necessarily a tool for massive predictions of natural disasters. While certainly we do want to have some type of awareness, we know that the charts of major earthquakes in California did receive and reveal some themes that were repetitive, such as the Leo Aquarius nodal axis or Aquarius Leo nodal axis, the prominence of Capricorn and the Aquarian energy in some of these charts, and the activation of the critical degrees. These patterns speak more to the movements of the collective pressure and transformation than an actual precise physical event. Now, earthquakes in reality are governed by geological forces, but if something is occurring above, will it affect us down below? The tectonic plates of shifting under immersed pressure over time. Is astrology seeing the blueprint behind what is manifesting in the Earth's collective core? Well, I don't know. Astrology, on the other hand, reflects the energetic and archetype climate surrounding those moments. When we look back, we may find correlations that feel meaningful and even uncanny, and even a little bit cautious, I would say. Maybe we might be a little bit more cautious when the 23 degrees hits that Aquarius and Leo nodal axis. Rather than using astrology to be focused on forecasting or being centered around fear-based events, it is a true value to look at the interpretation and the awareness of the patterns and reflect. We definitely use astrology to invite us to the deeper conversations and questions. What systems are under pressure? What structures are ready to evolve? And where are we being called to rebuild? Individually and collectively speaking, of course. In the end, astrology does not necessarily predict earthquakes. It just helps us understand the meaning that we may be assigned to in the area of creating revelation or creating areas of movement, and it adds a space, not necessarily a source to fear on, but an area of a space as a tool of our consciousness, our awareness, and our area of growth. So I want to thank everybody who listened to this podcast. Please like, subscribe, and don't forget to share this with your witchy bestie. Have an amazing day. Bye.